It was already past midnight. The show was over. The lights were coming down. The crowd had begun to dissolve into taxis, laughter, and exhaustion. For most people, the night was finished. But one person didn't leave. Outside the venue, under cold rain that soaked through clothes and patience alike, a single fan remained standing near the barricade, quiet, unmoving, unnoticed. Inside, Freddie Mercury was preparing to leave when something small, almost insignificant, caught his attention through a window. A figure still there. Waiting. Why would someone stay in the rain when the night was already over? What made Freddie stop walking, and look twice? And why would this brief encounter follow him long after the fan disappeared back into the dark? Stay with this story. And if you want the moments that reveal the human side of legends, subscribe now, because sometimes the smallest gestures leave the deepest marks. The rain had been falling steadily for hours. Not dramatic rain. Not cinematic thunder. Just the kind that wears you down quietly, soaking through jackets, shoes, resolve. The kind most people avoid without thinking twice. The venue was nearly empty now. Security was relaxed. Crew members were packing cables, stacking equipment, already mentally moving on to the next city, the next night. Freddie was inside, towel draped around his neck, makeup half removed, adrenaline still humming under his skin. He was tired in the way that came only after giving everything, voice, body, presence, to a crowd that had demanded it eagerly. He was ready to leave. As he passed a side corridor, he glanced out through a narrow window toward the street. It was habit more than curiosity. He liked observing how nights ended, how excitement drained from people once the spectacle was gone. That's when he saw them. One figure. Standing near the barricade. Still. The person wasn't waving. Wasn't shouting. Wasn't trying to attract attention. They simply stood there, rain pouring down, hands tucked into soaked sleeves, head slightly bowed as if waiting without expectation. Freddie slowed. Something about the stillness felt wrong. Or maybe too right. Most fans left quickly after shows, some disappointed, some fulfilled, most simply cold and tired. The idea of someone staying behind, alone, in the rain, struck Freddie as strangely intimate. He stopped walking. "Who's that?" he asked casually, nodding toward the window. A crew member glanced over. "Probably someone hoping to see you. They'll give up eventually." Freddie didn't answer. He kept looking. The rain slicked the pavement, reflecting scattered streetlights. The fan hadn't moved. Their clothes clung heavily now, unmistakably wet. Cars passed. People hurried by without noticing. Freddie felt a faint tightening in his chest. He knew that posture. Waiting without entitlement. Without demand. The kind of waiting that isn't loud enough to be noticed, but sincere enough to last. He remembered standing outside places once. Not venues like this, but doors that didn't open, opportunities that didn't come. He remembered what it felt like to wait without knowing if it mattered. "Has anyone spoken to them?" Freddie asked. The crew member shrugged. "Not yet." Freddie exhaled slowly. He didn't make a show of the decision. He didn't announce anything. He simply reached for his coat. "I'll be a minute," he said. The crew exchanged looks but didn't argue. Freddie moved toward the exit, the sound of rain growing louder as the door opened. The cold hit him immediately. Outside, the fan looked up, startled, disbelieving, eyes widening as recognition settled in. They hadn't expected this. Hadn't hoped for it loudly enough to believe it might happen. Freddie walked toward them, unhurried. "You'll catch your death out here," he said gently, voice calm, familiar, unmistakably real. The fan stammered, apologizing instinctively, words tumbling over each other. They explained they just wanted to say thank you. That they didn't want anything else. That they understood if it wasn't possible. Freddie listened. really listened. Rain dripped from his hair. From theirs. The moment felt suspended, unremarkable to anyone else, monumental to the two people inside it. Freddie studied the fan's face. Tired. Nervous. Honest. You didn't have to wait, he said. I know, the fan replied softly. But I wanted to. Something in that answer landed deeply. Freddie smiled, not the practiced smile of a stage god, but something smaller, warmer. Come on, he said. Let's get you out of the rain. And with that, the night changed. They stood just inside the doorway, sheltered from the rain but still close enough to hear it tapping insistently against the pavement. The warmth from inside the venue crept slowly into the cold air, fogging the glass behind them. Freddie shrugged off his coat and draped it over the fan's shoulders before they could protest. Don't argue, he said lightly. I insist. The fan froze for a second, overwhelmed by the gesture more than the cold. Their hands gripped the edges of the coat as if afraid it might vanish if they didn't hold on tightly enough. Freddie leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms, suddenly very still. So, he said. Tell me. The fan blinked. Tell you, what? Why you stayed, Freddie replied. Really? The fan hesitated. Rainwater dripped from their hair onto the ground between them. They seemed embarrassed, almost ashamed of their own sincerity. I didn't want anything, they said finally. I just needed to see you up close. To say thank you. Your music, it helped me through a really bad year. Freddie nodded slowly. He had heard variations of that sentence countless times. It was familiar. Almost expected. But something in the fan's voice was different. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. It was tired. What kind of year? Freddie asked quietly. The fan swallowed. Looked down. Then back up. The kind where you're not sure you'll make it to the next one. The words hung in the air between them, heavy but honest. Freddie felt something shift inside his chest, not surprise, but recognition. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it exist. I'm glad you did, he said simply. The fan's eyes welled up immediately. They looked embarrassed by it, wiping their face quickly, trying to regain composure. I didn't think you'd come out, they admitted. I just waited. I figured even if I didn't see you, at least I could say I stayed. Freddie studied them for a moment. Not as an icon. Not as someone being admired. As a person who had endured something invisible. You know, he said, voice softer now, waiting like that takes more courage than people think. The fan laughed nervously. It felt stupid, honestly. Freddie shook his head. No. It felt honest. That word landed. Honest. Freddie realized he hadn't planned to say any of this. He hadn't planned to feel this exposed, standing in a doorway with rain still dripping from his hair, talking to someone who owed him nothing. And yet, here he was. How long were you out there, he asked. Since the encore, the fan replied. I didn't want to miss you. Freddie exhaled slowly. That's a long time to stand in the rain. The fan smiled faintly. Worth it. Freddie looked away for a moment, staring out into the street where reflections of light shimmered in puddles. He felt an unexpected tightness behind his ribs. He had spent his life surrounded by devotion. By applause. By crowds that screamed his name until it felt unreal. But this? This was quiet devotion. Unseen. Unrewarded. The kind that doesn't ask to be acknowledged. Freddie turned back to the fan. I don't want you going home soaked like this, he said. Have you eaten? The fan shook their head automatically. Come on, Freddie said. There's food inside. And a towel. We'll get you warmed up. The fan hesitated. I don't want to be any trouble. Freddie smiled, not indulgently, but sincerely. You're not. They stepped inside together. No cameras. No crowd. No witnesses who would care. Just two people, sharing a moment neither had expected. As they walked down the corridor, Freddie felt something unfamiliar settle over him. Not responsibility. Connection. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he knew this conversation, brief as it might be, would stay with him longer than most nights filled with noise and applause. They sat at opposite ends of a small table backstage, steam rising from paper cups as someone passed quietly and left them alone. The fan's hands wrapped tightly around the cup, not for warmth anymore, but for grounding. Freddie watched them without staring. There was something in the way the fan held themselves, a guarded stillness, a careful politeness, that tugged at him. Not admiration. Not awe. Recognition. Freddie had seen that posture before. In mirrors. The fan spoke slowly, carefully choosing words, as if afraid of saying too much. They talked about music, about nights when sleep didn't come easily, about feeling invisible in rooms full of people. Freddie listened. And with every sentence, the distance between them and him shrank. He realized the fan wasn't looking at him like a savior. They weren't asking to be fixed. They were simply relieved to be heard without interruption, without judgment. That relief felt familiar. Freddie remembered being younger, standing in corners at parties, watching others laugh loudly, unsure how to enter without performing. He remembered how attention felt safer than intimacy, how applause could replace connection without fulfilling it. He remembered waiting. Waiting for someone to notice without demanding. The fan laughed softly at something they said, then stopped abruptly, embarrassed. Sorry, they murmured. I ramble when I'm nervous. Freddie smiled gently. You're not rambling. They looked up, surprised. You're explaining yourself, he continued. That's different. The fan blinked, absorbing the distinction. Freddie leaned back slightly, crossing his arms loosely, not to shield himself but to steady the thought forming in his mind. This person wasn't standing in the rain because they idolized him. They stood there because they understood waiting. And that understanding unsettled Freddie more than flattery ever could. He realized then how rarely people spoke to him without expectation. How often conversations with him were shaped by desire, for validation, for access, for proximity to the myth. This wasn't that. This was someone meeting him at eye level without realizing it. You know, Freddie said after a moment, I don't think people talk enough about how exhausting it is to survive quietly. The fan nodded immediately. Yes, they said. That's exactly it. Freddie felt the words echo inside him. Surviving quietly. He had survived loudly for years. Publicly. Spectacularly. But the quiet survival, the kind that happens when no one is watching, that was something he understood intimately. He realized then why he had gone outside. Not because he felt generous. But because something in that still figure in the rain had felt like a reflection. The fan looked at him carefully now, sensing the shift in tone. I didn't mean to make this heavy, they said quickly. I just. Freddie raised a hand gently. You didn't. He paused, choosing his next words with care. Sometimes, he said, the heaviest conversations are the ones that don't feel dramatic at all. The fan nodded again, eyes glistening slightly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was honest. Freddie felt something loosen inside him, a knot he hadn't known he was carrying. He realized that this conversation wasn't taking anything from him. It was giving. Not energy. Not admiration. Perspective. He looked at the fan again, really looked, and understood why this moment mattered. Because it wasn't about him being needed. It was about being seen, without costume, without performance, without myth. And that, Freddie realized, was rarer than applause. The conversation had slowed into something quieter. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because both of them understood that this was no longer about filling space. It was about letting words land where they needed to. Freddie rested his elbows lightly on the table, fingers loosely intertwined. His posture had softened. There was no urgency in him now, no sense of needing to impress or guide the moment. The fan sat very still, as if afraid that moving might break something fragile. They talked about small things for a while, music they loved, places they had never been, ordinary details that felt grounding after the weight of what had already been shared. But beneath the surface, something deeper was forming. Freddie felt it. That familiar pressure, the one that comes right before a truth surfaces. He studied the fan's face again. The tiredness was still there, but something else had joined it now. Openness. The kind that doesn't ask to be fixed, only acknowledged. Freddie spoke slowly. You know, he said, people think being strong means never needing anyone. The fan looked up. They're wrong. The fan nodded faintly, unsure where this was going. Freddie continued, voice calm but precise. Real strength is knowing when you're allowed to be seen as you are. Not improved. Not brave. Just, real. The fan swallowed hard. I don't feel strong, they admitted. I just feel like I'm surviving. Freddie didn't correct them immediately. He leaned back slightly, considering. Then he said the thing that would stay. Surviving is already proof you're stronger than you think. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't delivered like a speech. Freddie didn't even raise his voice. That was why they mattered. The fan's eyes filled instantly. Tears spilled before they could stop them, hands flying up in embarrassment. I'm sorry, they whispered. I didn't expect. Freddie shook his head gently. No apologies. Ever. The fan laughed weakly through tears. You don't know how long it's been since someone said that to me. Freddie felt a tightness in his throat, quick, sharp, unexpected. I do know, he said quietly. And in that moment, he meant it. He wasn't speaking as a musician, or an icon, or someone admired from afar. He was speaking as someone who had survived by turning pain into performance, loneliness into sound, uncertainty into movement. He reached across the table, not to touch, not to overwhelm, just close enough to bridge the space. You don't owe the world an explanation for staying alive, Freddie said. You don't owe anyone proof. The fan stared at him, stunned. Those words didn't feel comforting. They felt liberating. Something in the fan's posture changed. Their shoulders lowered. Their breathing steadied. The constant tension they carried loosened, just a little. They wiped their face and nodded slowly. I think I needed to hear that from someone who understands, they said. Freddie smiled, softly, knowingly. We understand more than people think, he replied. There was no more advice after that. None was needed. The moment didn't demand resolution. It didn't need to be wrapped up in hope or promises. It simply existed, honest, unadorned, complete. Freddie stood a few minutes later, signaling gently that it was time. Not because the connection had run its course, but because it had found its place. As the fan rose too, Freddie said one last thing, almost casually, as if it didn't carry weight. Don't disappear on yourself, he said. The fan froze. They nodded slowly. I won't, they said. And Freddie believed them. The fan left quietly. No dramatic goodbye. No lingering hugs. Just a soft thank you, eyes still red, posture a little lighter than before. Freddie watched them disappear down the corridor, the echo of their footsteps fading until the space returned to its usual backstage stillness. And yet, something remained. Freddie didn't move right away. He stayed seated for a moment longer than necessary, staring at the empty chair across from him. The paper cups had gone cold. The air felt heavier now, not uncomfortable, but charged, like a room after a storm. He hadn't planned to feel this way. Encounters with fans happened constantly. Some were intense, some emotional, some fleeting. Most blurred together over time. They lived in the same category as applause, real, but transient. This one didn't. Because it hadn't asked anything from him. That realization followed Freddie as he finally stood, slipping his jacket back on, moving through familiar hallways that suddenly felt different. The laughter from the crew sounded distant now. The night had shifted into something quieter, more introspective. Freddie replayed the conversation in fragments. Not the words themselves, but the stillness between them. The lack of performance. The ease with which honesty had surfaced without being forced. He realized something unsettling. He felt more himself in that brief exchange than he had felt all night on stage. That thought stayed with him. Later, alone in the car, city lights sliding past the window, Freddie rested his head back and closed his eyes. The noise of the show felt far away now, like it belonged to someone else. He thought about the fans standing in the rain. Not the devotion, but the patience. The willingness to wait without certainty. Freddie recognized that feeling too well. He had spent years waiting in different ways, waiting to be understood, waiting to feel aligned with himself, waiting for moments that didn't demand he perform his worth. That fan hadn't idolized him. They had mirrored him. And that was what lingered. Freddie understood then that connection didn't always come from shared joy. Sometimes it came from shared endurance. From recognizing the quiet strength it takes to keep going when no one is watching. He wondered how many people in his life truly spoke to him without expecting something in return. How many conversations were shaped by admiration instead of equality. This one hadn't been. And that mattered more than he could explain. Freddie didn't become sentimental about it. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't frame it as a lesson learned. But something subtle shifted. He listened more carefully afterward. He noticed the people who spoke softly. He paid attention to those who waited rather than demanded. He found himself drawn to honesty that didn't announce itself. The fans' words didn't echo in his mind, but their presence did. The way they had sat. The way they had breathed after the tears came. The way relief had settled when they realized they didn't need to justify their survival. Freddie realized that night that he wasn't just admired. He was trusted. And trust carried a different kind of responsibility than fame ever had. He didn't feel burdened by it. He felt anchored. As the car turned onto a quieter street, Freddie opened his eyes and looked out again. The rain had stopped. The pavement reflected light softly now, no longer slick with urgency. He thought of one sentence in particular. Don't disappear on yourself. He had said it to the fan. But the truth was, it applied to him too. There was no record of that night. No photographs. No headlines. No story passed around in interviews years later. And that was exactly why it mattered. The fan returned to their life. The venue returned to routine. The tour moved forward, city after city, night after night. To the world, nothing remarkable had happened. But for Freddie, the moment didn't fade. It settled. He carried it quietly, the way certain truths stay with you, not as memories you revisit, but as lenses through which you begin to see differently. Freddie never tried to recreate that night. He didn't seek out similar encounters or turn it into a ritual. He understood instinctively that what made it meaningful was its honesty, not its repetition. It had happened because neither of them was trying to make it happen. And that realization stayed with him. Freddie began noticing the unrecorded moments more, the ones that didn't make it into stories or mythology. The brief conversations. The silences. The looks that said more than applause ever could. He realized how many important moments in life passed without witnesses. And how little that mattered. The fan had walked away lighter, not because Freddie was famous, but because he had spoken to them as an equal. And Freddie walked away steadier, not because he had helped someone, but because he had recognized himself in another person's endurance. That recognition softened something in him. Not in a sentimental way. In a grounding way. Freddie understood then that connection didn't require longevity. It didn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it required nothing more than presence at the exact moment someone needed it. And that presence, he realized, didn't belong exclusively to the stage. The music would continue. The performances would remain extraordinary. The legend would grow louder. But beneath all of that, Freddie carried a quieter truth. That the most meaningful impact he would ever have might come from moments no one ever applauded. That thought didn't diminish his art. It deepened it. Freddie didn't speak about that night, but it influenced how he listened afterward. How he chose his words. How he allowed space for people who weren't trying to be seen, but needed to be acknowledged. And somewhere out there, a fan carried a sentence with them, one that arrived at the right time, in the right rain, from someone who didn't need to save them to matter. That was the legacy of that night. Not a story told. A life nudged. A truth shared. A moment allowed to exist without spectacle. Freddie Mercury would continue to be remembered for his voice, his presence, his command of the stage. But moments like this, quiet, unfilmed, unclaimed, explained something deeper about who he was when no one was watching. He didn't change the world that night. He changed one moment. And sometimes, that's enough.